now.
Right, okay.
Yep, we're live now, Chair.
Right, we're live now. Welcome everybody to the Petitions Committee. As you are aware, we are under virtual meeting rules, and this is a meeting of the Virtual Petitions Committee. I'll go item 2, attendance and apologies for absence. Nicola.
Afternoon, Chair. We have apologies for absence from Councillor Sesford and I believe also Councillor Campbell.
Right. Minutes. Minutes of the previous meeting were held here at County Hall, Morpeth on the 31st of July 2019 at 2 p.m. Can we agree that we are happy with those minutes?
Move as a true record, Chair.
Anybody wish to comment on them? I see nobody. I'll move on to item 4, disclosure of members' interests. Julie. Councillor Foster, if you
Sorry, I was just trying to unmute there. Yes, Chair, I would like to declare an interest in item 6.1, speeding vehicles in Stakeford. I won't be participating in that part of the meeting because I actually raised the petition in the first place. Thank you, Chair.
Noted. Anybody else? Cannot see anybody else. Okay. Report of the Executive Director of Generation, Commercial and Economy. Item 5, 5.1. This is solar panels on new builds. Now, this is Appendix A. Nicola, do you need to read who starts this? Rob or Nicola?
Normally the procedure would ask that the invite the lead petitioner to speak. Obviously we have revised procedures with regard to written representations, so I can read that out now from the lead petitioner.
Right, okay, you do that.
Thank you for considering our petition, solar panels on all new builds. Through changing local planning rules for domestic properties in Northumberland, using existing local powers the council possess would be extremely beneficial in a number of ways. It would, 1, grow the local PV supply chain, including manufacturing, training, consultancy, installation and general electrical components. 2, reduce the cost of electricity for people in new build, including those in social and affordable housing. 3, reduce the costs of solar for the general public, as a large competitive supply chain would grow as a result of this policy. 4, create a range of jobs across the region. 5, lead to substantial reductions in CO2 emissions and hence fight climate change. 6, place Northumberland as a leader within sustainability in England. 7, have minimal financial costs for Northumberland County Council. Whilst the Future Homes policy is coming in the year 2025, we believe by enacting this policy now, Northumberland County Council will create a strong renewable energy supply chain with the associated jobs as part of the regional recovery from coronavirus. Also, from a scientific basis, the year 2025 is too late to enact low carbon building policies. A similar policy has already been enacted in Scotland, where energy efficiency standards are designed such as to force the inclusion of solar PV on new domestic properties. As a local authority which shares a border with Scotland, in order to enable consistent policies, we would encourage an alignment with Scottish planning law in order to legislate solar PV on new build. In terms of the details of planning law, we have attached a report by the Solar Trade Association called Leading Lights. This explains on page 9 of that report the powers local authorities in England have, demonstrating that the change proposed by this petition can be implemented. We are aware that many local authorities fear bringing in rules such as solar PV on new build will prevent house builders constructing new homes within the authority area. We counter that with the following evidence. All of the local authorities, including all those in Scotland, which have implemented higher building standards, have shown no change in rates of housing development compared with the UK average. Having discussed this with other local authorities, we feel many in the North East would be open to following a similar policy were Northumberland County Council willing to start first. Generally, when installing solar, developers tend to use local SMEs. Thus, this policy will create new jobs, including enabling the creation of new businesses and the diversification of existing electrical companies. A master's dissertation undertaken by Nina Vidon at Newcastle University showed that if such a policy was exacted across the North East, it would result in between 1,203 and 6,088 long-term jobs being created. The majority of new built houses in Northumberland would be able to accommodate enough solar PV to, at current efficiencies, produce a similar amount of electricity to the average non-heating electrical demand of a house. Therefore, in terms of electrical use, not counting space heating and domestic hot water, these new homes would be net zero in terms of operational emissions. According to the previously mentioned dissertation, if such a policy were applied across the entire North East, this would save 760 tonnes of carbon dioxide, equivalent over a 5-year period, including the embedded carbon emissions. We have received letters of support from the following North East organisations, and that is the lead petitioner: Erect Distributed Energy Limited and GeoWarmth Limited. The lead petitioner did attach some additional evidence, which obviously the protocol does not allow to be distributed, but that was the study from Nina Vidon, Social, Economic, Technical and Environmental Impact Assessment of the Obligation of PV Systems in New Domestic Builds in the North East of England. And that was at Newcastle University in 2019. Including a one-page summary of the aforementioned, and also the Solar Trade Association Leading Lights, How Local Authorities Are Making Solar and Energy Storage Work Today. That was dated 2019. In summary, enforcing solar PV on all new build properties would be an effective way to fight climate change, whilst at the same time costing Northumberland County Council very little. It would place the council as a leader in fighting climate change and create a local clean energy supply chain, building up the local Northumberland economy. Thank you.
Right. I know I've got Rob Murphin, Head of Planning here, and I've got Councillor Glenn Sanderson, whose portfolio takes in climate change. Who's wanting to go first? Glenn, you need to mute.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. It's something for Rob to take up, primarily because it is very much a planning and building control matter. However, I'm grateful to the petitioner for raising this. We are aware of the value of solar panels and photovoltaic cells, and where we can install them, we will, and we are. The petitioner would also perhaps be interested to know that we are progressing well with our climate change action plan, being one of the first councils in the country to actually pick up and begin work on an action plan as detailed as ours. So we are doing the very best we can in terms of climate change, but sometimes our hands are tied by either national or regional policies. And I think if I can hand over to Rob now to explain what those are, please.
Right, Rob.
Thanks, Chair. Firstly, like Councillor Sanderson, I would like to thank the petitioner for putting this request in, because we share absolutely ambitions to roll out sustainable construction techniques across the entire built environment. So not just new residential properties, but new commercial properties, and look for every opportunity to have all forms of sustainable construction methods rolled out. We do, however, need to convince the government via the Planning Inspectorate that any additional requirements we put in above national requirements are viable. Okay, and this has fallen at a particular time for us because we are currently going through the public examination of our new local plan, and we are talking a lot about viability. What that basically says is that when you look at all the policy asks that we put on the development industry, and it isn't just for putting on solar panels, but it's for contributions to education, contributions to health facilities, critically contributions for affordable housing, as well as public open space and highway works, we have to absolutely evidence the fact that that total shopping list of things we are putting on will not adversely affect the viability of new build given the economic market conditions in different parts of the county? Okay, the first point is, unfortunately, some of our housing market areas, we are not being able to ask for issues like affordable housing because of the viability argument. Okay, so we need to pick carefully what we ask for, which brings me on to my second point, is that I want to roll forward a variety of sustainable construction concepts and renewable energy concepts. And if we're going to ask for something, I don't want to be as prescriptive as saying it's just PV. You know, we have a new policy going through the local plan as well, which unusually for a local authority local plan is supported now by Friends of the Earth, and that's to look for every opportunity for sustainable methods of construction. So on some buildings, on some sites, solar may not be the most cost efficient or best way forward, and we could be looking at other technologies. What the policy approach gives us is that while we won't have a prescriptive requirement for PV on every building, we will look for every opportunity through negotiating planning decisions to incorporate as many sustainable construction concepts and technologies as possible. So to build up then, we support the ideology behind the request. We cannot justify it at the moment because of our plan level viability work, but we have incorporated a policy approach that we will look for opportunities wherever they come up. And that may be PV or it may not. Because what the policy effectively says is that all new development has to constitute sustainable development. And so we will look at the complete package of measures that's going to be required. If national legislation changes, we will follow that. But at the moment, unfortunately, the viability does not enable us to convince the planning inspectorate and central government, as this is a requirement for every new house.
Right. Members, any comment or Councillor Flux?
Yeah, I think obviously if we could have a magic wand and force this to be the case, and and everything fine, then we'd do that. I don't think there's anyone who wouldn't. However, the question I was going to ask if this was in place, would it require every new build or every building to have a south-facing roof?
Rob?
Yeah, and actually it's a very interesting question by Councillor Flux, because it isn't just about putting the panels on the roof, and he's right in that when I talk about the overall design discussion that needs to take place through negotiation, building orientation is really important, particularly when you're talking about the really big opportunities, things like warehousing sheds, large ones that have very big roof spaces. If they are aligned correctly, they are fantastic opportunities for PV. But if the site restrictions or the site constraints in terms of the shape of the site doesn't allow for that, you may be better going for other technologies of sustainable construction. So I agree, though, that the default answer almost should be that we will always look for it for PV on roofs, but I wouldn't want to say it's an automatic requirement, because on some it will work better than on others.
Okay. Leslie Rickaby.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I have some sympathy with the petition, and I would say I'd like to wholeheartedly agree to it. But I hear what Rob's saying, and you use the word ideology, and I think we have to realise that it is the fact of how can we ensure in the future that everybody would want this sort of thing on their house. Now, I don't know from the petition whether we're talking about houses that the council will build or private buyers, private developments, because speaking now as a possible, or maybe not, but a house buyer, I don't know whether I would want necessarily to have solar panels or maybe something else. So and I would worry that that the cost of putting any of this in would actually fall back on the house buyer.
Yeah.
And I think the house buyer should have the choice, maybe negotiations with the developer. As I say, if I picked it up wrong, I apologize, but I'm coming from, you know, if I wanted to buy a house and they said, well, you can buy this one, but you're going to have solar panels, I may not want that.
Rob?
Yeah, Chair. I think it is a good question, but we have to put it in a wider context. And remember that there's a gradual move through building control standards and building regulation to improve things like the thermal efficiency of homes. And those are givens to the development industry. So be they public or private sector housing, we expect properties to be built that way. It's a good question because come 2025, we aren't going to be fitting gas-fired central heating for the issues of climate change to new properties, and that's new private as well as public. And it may well be that some consumers who are buying new homes wouldn't want that, but in that example, government have taken the view that it's so important that they take a national decision. With solar panels, what we are saying is that this policy suggestion from the petition is saying that all new homes should have it fitted. And I'm saying that could well be an advantage. But at the moment, it's the practicalities of that as a consistent basis, and it's the viability implications. But the assumption would be, to answer your question, is that changes like this would apply to all new homes and the final purchaser wouldn't have a say in it. Yeah?
Right. Did I have Mark Swinburne or Eileen? Mark?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. It's picking up a bit. I know Rob's answered some of this, and Councillor Flux mentioned as well, and it's about the south-facing aspect. So, just doing a bit of research myself, I know the once generous feed-in tariffs have now been dropped, so there's no longer the 5% VAT. It's back up to 20%. But to have the optimum solution for photovoltaic cells on the roof, you're looking at, you know, properties being south facing. A normal family usage is 3.5 to 4 kilowatt peak, and the highest output you're talking May to August, and then that drops down to 10% through the winter months. But the peak demand doesn't match the peak output, as it were. So when everyone's out of the house is when most of the electricity is being generated. So the other thing to consider is to recover that about putting batteries in properties. And we all know that there's environmental issues with batteries as well. So to be able to reverse that, you know, there's lots of things to take into consideration. As Rob's already said, not every property is going to be south facing. To turn around and make this a policy that way would put it in every property, and then we find out that even in the south facing properties, it's not wholly efficient. I think it's not the right way to go ahead when we have other efficiencies and other efficient methods that can be used. Yes, Rob's already said we'll use the best method in the properties that we can, and this is an option that we will look at, but I feel going down the route of forcing it in every property may not be the best way to go.
Right, I've got Rob, and then I'll go to Eileen.
Yeah, just a point for clarification. It's for clarification. This touches on the last two comments made by members. Remember as well, though, is that the efficiency and therefore the cost to kilowatt hours ratios is improving all the time on PV panels. And the current generation of PV panels, even if aren't on a south-facing elevation, are still more efficient than like the first generation of equipment using in PV. And I suppose as well, we have to ask ourselves is, as the technology develops, we will see things like PV panels that look a lot more like conventional roof tiles as well. The entire point here, though, is at the moment, the evidence is saying that this as a prescriptive mandatory approach isn't affordable in terms of the housing market conditions here. It may well be as we move forward in time and as new products come online, and the government may change. Government may take the decision that in order to step change uptake, they need to make this mandatory, as they're going to do with gas-fired central heating. So there are lots of issues playing out here, and there are reasons to do things, but some of the reasons that we're not doing it now are more about the practicalities rather than a long-term, principle here.
Eileen.
He's just said some of what I was going to say.
Good, right?
No, I'm not finished. It's just, I don't think we should restrict ourselves to one energy saving kind of thing. I think we need to look at other options that will fit in line with our community. But as time goes on, new technologies are coming out all the time. If this is taken and this is accepted, then we're going to be stuck with this. We need to progress forward with the new technologies and new things. And I'm not saying it won't work on all of the houses, because it won't, but it could be used some of the time, but not all of the time. Because there will be other things coming up.
Okay, Julie.
Thank you, Chair. Again, some of mine's been said already, but just to put my bit in, basically, in principle, I think this is a fantastic idea at first glance. But when you start looking at it in more detail and more in depth and thinking about the longer term repercussions of this sort of thing, it's something we would have to be more careful with. And I think ultimately the best option is to leave it open to allow the best fit technology to be installed, rather than saying it has to be solar panels, so that the property itself benefits from the best possible option available to that property and its owners or tenants. Thanks, Chair.
Right. For my penneth, I do have sympathy with this, because I think longer term it will, I don't know, maybe we'll get slates that look like solar panels and think technology will move on. As someone who's got hydroelectric at my other farm in Scotland, which is absolutely fantastic, and guess what? It runs best in the winter. Or in Scotland, it can be tremendous in August, but it really, really does work. And when I drive up to Scotland and you see all the wind turbines sitting still, my water technology is still running, as it were. And I think that could be a way forward that hasn't happened this side of the Pennines. Councillor Sanderson.
Thank you. If we're finishing on this, can I just add one quick point, which is that as a council, we are looking at our own housing stock, and Homes for Northumberland we're looking at those houses to check on the EPC issues, the environmental impact that they have, and that work has just begun. So we are looking very closely at that, and we'll continue to do that to see what efficiencies and improvements we might be able to make in a sustainable way over time.
And I recall when I was chairman of FACS, we helped the process of getting a lot of schools to take on these solar panels. So, that we'll be reaping the reward, but I think in time those panels will be out of date and we'll have to have a big budget spend on replacing them. However, I'll move on. We have 3 recommendations in front of you. One is the Petitions Committee is asked to note the issues raised in the petition. I think we've done that. Petition Committee is asked to note that the Council's approach to solar photovoltaics is being installed on all new buildings. Well, I think we are trying to do that. And the request to require all new buildings, build homes to be built with solar photovoltaic installations, is not supported for the reasons set out in this report and what we've heard from Officer Rob Murphin. Are we in agreement with that?
Agreed, Chair.
Are we all agreed? Just
Agreed.
thank you, and I'd like to thank the petitioner if they are watching or listening. We are listening, we are acting, but some of these things are out of our control. But I do sympathise, and I think it will be the way forward when we're ready to go. Okay, that's that one. The next one is item 6, report of the Service Director, Local Services, 6.1, speeding vehicles in Stakeford. And I'm going over, I think I've got Paul Jones and Neil Snowden, although I can see Leslie Little has appeared. Leslie, do you want to kick this off?
Yes, thank you, Chair. This is the statement from the petitioner. For many years, residents have been complaining about the speeding in Stakeford, and the road from the Stakeford roundabout up to the Guidepost roundabout is no exception. Residents' vehicles have been hit by speeding motorists along this road, and some speeding motorists have ended up through garden walls of some of the properties, causing considerable damage. The road is part of what is being referred to as a racetrack, which includes roads through Stakeford, Choppington and Bedlington Station, and the activities of these fast drivers, combined with loud exhaust on some of the vehicles, are causing misery for the residents who live along this road. It is also a route to and from Ashington, and this also seems to attract speeding drivers. The statutory speed limit on this road is 30 miles per hour. I have been asking for the results of the speed surveys on this road over a number of years, and the figures in this report from a survey in June last year are the first figures I have seen. As you know, speed survey data is merely a snapshot in time, and I know that some drivers actively slow down before going over the tubes. However, the results still support the residents' concerns. The first set of data states that around 1,500 vehicles travelling eastbound were at above 31 miles per hour, meaning most were travelling anywhere from 31 miles per hour up to 50 miles per hour. 7 vehicles travelling at between 51 miles per hour and 56 miles per hour, and 1 between 56 miles per hour and 61 miles per hour. That is approximately 14% of the daily volume of traffic on the road exceeding the statutory speed limit eastbound. Around 1,250 westbound vehicles were travelling above 31 miles an hour, meaning most were travelling anywhere from 31 miles per hour up to 50 miles per hour, 8 travelling between 51 miles per hour and 56 miles per hour, and 2 between 56 miles per hour and 61 miles per hour. That is approximately 11% of the daily volume of traffic on the road exceeding the statutory speed limit westbound. That's approximately 25% of the 11,000 vehicles using that road on a daily basis. This is a road which has a primary school further along, and also is a main crossing point for those attending Stakeford Primary and Bedlington Academy. So at certain parts of the day, there can be a good number of school children utilising that route. Some of this speeding is occurring at night when it's quieter, and this serves to accentuate the noise caused by the speeding vehicles, particularly those with noisy exhausts. Residents are reporting being woken up in the early hours by the noisy exhaust and the sound of an engine racing as a vehicle is accelerating along the road. This is unacceptable and is affecting the quality of life of these residents. It is acknowledged that speeding is a criminal offence and an issue that the police need to deal with. However, current resourcing levels make this difficult for the police, and it is the residents who are suffering. I have committed funds from my members' local improvement schemes allowance for a preliminary design to identify possible measures to reduce vehicle speeds. So on behalf of the residents who live along this road and the rest of the residents in Stakeford who are affected by the racetrack, I ask that the content of the report is noted, but that this would also be brought back to the Area Council within a reasonable timescale to inform residents of any proposals being put forward. Thank you, Chair.
Right, who's going on this one? Glenn, do you want to come in before the officers?
Yeah, thank you. I would like to. This kind of situation is very common throughout the county and throughout the country. And I'm sure that every member involved in this call have similar kinds of issues where local people demand action. That's why we have to have a very strict and disciplined approach to this that involves at the beginning to do a traffic monitoring, a traffic speed testing, just to see what actually the situation is, because often the real situation is different from perception. And so on the basis of that, that is what we've carried out here. And on the basis of the results, we are proposing that if the local council wants to introduce some traffic calming, then it is funded through the member scheme money. It's actually one of the key things that we use our member scheme money for. That's what it's there for. And again, I'm sure many members in this call will be doing the same thing with their own specific fund. So all I can say is we do have to have an approach that is fair and is transparent and is equal for all members throughout the county, and that's what we do.
Okay, who's going, Neil or Paul?
I'll let Neil cover the technical aspects, Chair.
Okay, Neil.
Yeah, I mean the concerns along Stake Folio we've been aware of those for a little while. I used to live there myself, so I know what it is like. The speed surveys we're done that don't actually meet the criteria for enforcement at present. It's the 85th percentile isn't quite high enough. It's got to be 35 miles an hour. That means there's 85% of the vehicles using that road going that speed or less. So it's not quite there yet, but the police are working on a new enforcement strategy, which the information from the petition will be passed. It's already been passed to the police, and they'll be investigating there. Hopefully, being able to carry out some enforcement in the future once this new enforcement strategy is up and running. It could be at neighbourhood police level rather than the camera van, because the local police are able to enforce. But it has been a problem for a while, and I know what the statement said there. It does tend to be an issue in the evening. They use a boy racer, if you like, around the area. So it is a problem we're well aware of. So hopefully the police will be able to take the appropriate action in due course. And with regard to the schools, we do have a 20 mile an hour advisory, 20 mile an hour in place. That does seem to work. I haven't heard anything that it doesn't work. Hopefully that does make it a bit safer at school start and finish times. But obviously we're going to take a look at that in September once the schools are back and we've obviously got more kids back at school. So we'll monitor all that as well.
Anybody? I think this is a blight of everywhere, isn't it?
It is, definitely.
For me on the 696, it's the motorbikes every weekend.
Yeah.
If I made that sort of noise on a tractor, I'd be pulled in.
Yeah.
Councillor Eileen Carty.
Yeah, just to say, we've got similar problems in Blythe. I use some of my members' fund to buy the community police cameras, you know, where you've got the community volunteer schemes. Volunteers go out, do the cameras, the handheld cameras. They actually don't get involved in anything. They just take the readings, and then anybody who is caught speeding is sent a letter, and it's followed through that way. I don't know if that's happening in other areas of the county, but we've certainly got it in Blythe. I believe Cromlin might have it as well.
Councillor Flux?
Yeah, it does. But I was just going to say, looking at the report, I think that it outlines the correct procedure to go through this. As you say, we've all got issues. I've got issues on the A192 in East Hertford. I know that Councillor Swinburne has issues on Dudley Lane. We can all put our two pennyworth where we've got a problem. It's a county-wide and nationwide, frankly, problem. But I think we as councillors, it's our duty to try and come up with solutions. And sometimes we can come up with a whole solution, and sometimes we can come up with a part solution. And I think in this instance, we're going what it suggests in the report is that they're going in the right direction, and I would support it and move that we follow the recommendation, Chair.
Thank you. That's that. It was mentioned about we all have this problem. Do we know where the police camera vans go? Do we get notification? Do we have any results? Because to my mind, as a recipient of a nice letter from the police in Gateshead, and I'll have to go on the course because I was lost. I think they seem to be just only interested in where they can make money on a sort of 9 till 5 basis, and they're never out at night in the hotspots of the boy racer land. And I don't know if that's the right word to use, but speeding youths with a big exhaust. Do we have any information from the police of where they target, or is it just following their money?
They do have a set of sites which is available on the NSRI website. All accounts in the Northumbria Force area, they're all on there. But as I say, the police are working on a new enforcement strategy. So when issues more locally get raised, they can have a look at those issues and maybe carry out enforcement immediately on areas they haven't done previously. At present, there's a huge process to go through to get new sites on board. But this new process they are looking at, they're hoping to have it implemented in September. It allows them to investigate a lot more quickly and address these sort of issues we're having around the county. I should point out as well that since lockdown, the speeding concerns we're getting, they've gone through the roof really. People say the open roads and that they're just taking advantage of that, which really isn't acceptable. So it's the same issue around the country.
Councillor Flux.
I was just going to say, I've noticed that the speed van is going in more varied locations. Certainly in my part of the world, it is than it previously had, and that would be something I would welcome, because I think some of us can predict 3 or 4 places. It's always been, if we can predict that, then speeding motorists can predict that as well. Potentially, I think that it does need to be in more varied locations, and I would welcome that.
Paul?
Chair, good comment.
Yep.
So we do, as part of the Northumberland Road Safety Initiative, work with the other local authorities and the police, looking at the enforcement arrangements, particularly with the speed enforcement cameras, and that is an evidence-led basis. So we use the accident data, the speeding data, to target areas of speeding concern. And Neil's team work with the police to ensure that the police have actually got locations at those sites where they can actually safely park the camera enforcement vehicle and undertake that enforcement action to help safeguard people's lives and reduce speed in those locations. We continue to work with the police in terms of the number and extent of those locations and the frequency at which they operate from them. And we have pressed them to have a wider and I think more even distribution of some of those sites, rather than picking on some of the busier sites. It's trying to make sure that it's, again, an even distribution, and that we're tackling the speeding problems across the county as a whole. They have been responsive to that, and we continue to work with them to make sure that their resources are best targeted to suit everyone's needs.
Councillor Sanderson.
Thank you. I mean, what Paul has said in a very polite way is something that has been an issue certainly for myself and for others in the last few years. I am absolutely convinced that the deployment of the camera van was not, strictly speaking, based on accident data and safety issues. And I am more satisfied now over the last couple of years that it is. That the camera van is deployed in more varied locations, and in those locations where there is a genuine either an accident record or a serious speeding problem that could cause accidents. So I think there has been a significant change in that, and I welcome that, and I want to see that continue. What I don't want to see is going back to the bad old days where you would see that camera van parked, for example, just outside Morpeth on a regular basis. Where there wasn't a single accident, there wasn't for years. So I think I would thank Neil and Paul and staff involved with the police and the police themselves for taking a much more sensible attitude now and a realistic attitude than they did previously.
Right. I think we could go on a long time on this one. We've all got tales. I mean, we couldn't hold meetings in Morpeth Town Hall because of the noise of the boy races once over. The recommendation is to that the Petitions Committee note the content of the report and acknowledge receipt of the petition. Are we happy to do that? And in the light of what we've heard, we will take that. Nicola, yes?
I think we were just wondering whether we could bring in some of the points within the key issues. I think in paragraph 6, 8 and 9, whether we could incorporate those, whether that would be appropriate.
Working with the police. 6, 8 and 9. This says here, Councillor Foster has agreed to fund preliminary design work. I'm happy with that.
Note that.
And 9, Glenn, are you happy that the local transport plan is, I think it'll be for next year. Are you happy with that? I think this pandemic has shown up a fair bit of speeding.
I can say that I'd be more than happy to put that in amongst the other the other possible schemes, and we will rate those on Shearer's list. But certainly, it should be involved and included. Yes.
Okay. Are we happy with that?
Agreed.
Everybody's saying yes. Okay, let's move on to our final item of petitions. 6.2, petition requesting to erect a fence or barrier between Crofton Grange estate and land opposite Stardale Avenue, Blythe. Paul, are you taking this? Who's taking this?
I am, yes.
Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. So, as you can see in the report, there's a petition being lodged by residents expressing concerns of vehicles, basically, for want of a better description, running across a piece of public open space grassland area between the Crofton Grange estate in Blythe and Stardale Avenue. This is something that we've investigated and looked at. We actually, as the report outlines, the land is we believe in private ownership, but we're not entirely sure as to who that is. We are still undertaking investigations into ownership, and it's not conclusive as yet. There has been an indication that, as you would expect, it ties into the former developer of one of the estates, but that hasn't been confirmed yet, and we're still chasing that through. We have approached the developer of the persimmons of the new estate as one of the areas where vehicles are coming from, but we haven't secured a positive response out of them in terms of any action to try and help address the problem. And to be fair to the petitioners, and we do welcome the petition from them, there is an issue there. There are clearly vehicles traversing the area. It is an area that is used by people for dog walking, for kids playing and just general recreational purposes. So clearly vehicles cutting across grassland isn't acceptable and isn't appropriate. Whilst we don't pay for the maintenance of that area, with it being in private ownership, we do, as part of a service level agreement with Blythe Town Council, actually undertake grass cutting to ensure that the area is kept clean and tidy. And it's something that they pay for and pay us to undertake that work as part of the partnership agreement we have with Blythe Town Council. Because again, they're concerned that a large open space such as that needs to be kept in a reasonable condition, even if we can't ascertain the true ownership of that. So we do, as part of those works, have to go in pretty much most winters in recent years, having to undertake grading activity just to take out ruts and other problems where the basically vehicles have churned up the area, creating tripping hazards, creating hazards for people that would be walking across there where they could turn an ankle and hurt themselves. And that is something that clearly isn't ideal for us either. So we have looked at the viability of restricting access. There's numerous access points from both sides of the estate that vehicles are using. And we had looked at what's the minimum that we could do in terms of trying to restrict access. And as it outlines in the recommendations, that is to put in 50 metres of what's classed as bird's mouth fencing, which is the short wooden post and rail fencing that would go along the Wooler Grange area at a cost of just over £2,250. we have, since the report was drafted, also now received offer from Councillor Grant Davey, who is willing to cover the cost of undertaking the additional works at Stardale Avenue, and is willing to pay for the 120 metres of Birdsmouth fencing in that location at a cost of just over £4,850. And that is something that we would certainly wish to accept from our perspective, in that it basically then encloses off both areas and prevents vehicles from entering the area, getting so far across, realising they can't get over and having to turn back round. So that would be a better solution all round to fence off both locations and enable us to do that.
Right.
So that's where we are at the moment. Thank you.
I did speak with Grant Davey, who said he's prepared to fund this extra or whatever it is that's required. Councillor Sanderson, do you wish to?
Yeah, I do. I've been to see this area a couple of times over the last 12 months. It is something that does need to be dealt with, and I'm grateful to Paul for coming up with the initial funding, and obviously grateful that members' local scheme money is also going to be added to that. I'm really grateful that the petitioners got themselves organised and put this in, because the people who do drive over the grass, and there's quite a lot of them, not only put lives at risk, but they make a terrible mess of the place that people like to look after and call their home. So thank you very much, Paul, for this, and to the local member. And I'm really pleased that we're going to hopefully go ahead with this.
I've got Councillor Carty. Eileen, can you unmute?
Oh, forgot. Sorry, thank you. Just to say, I know that area quite well. The land, I think, used to belong to Leaches at one point. Anyway, but the land does tend to get a bit damp as well, because there's a burn runs underneath, right? I can imagine the grass really getting churned up in the winter, and the problems it does have. Children do play on that bit of land, because I've seen it happen, and it's delivery vehicles as well that's cutting over, so they're quite big, large vans. It's not just a car or a motorbike. Even that wouldn't be acceptable anyway. So I would actually propose that we move forward with this, and we just get it dealt with and sorted out.
Well, I think that's what's in the report that we.
So can we just move it or not?
Yes, I think we can.
Thank you.
Can we all agree? Hands up.
Agreed.
Right, Paul, over to you. Get it done and take Grant's money. Right, back to the agenda. Date of next meeting is supposed to be the 29th of October at 2 p.m. Urgent business, I have none. I think we are all done. Thank you, members. Thank you, officers. Okay, thank you.